Hello everybody, today you're watching the Tropics topics of October the 9th, 2018. There's still a lot to talk about in the Atlantic, more so than you would usually expect during October. There are three active named storms, but most of the focus, if not all the focus, should be on Hurricane Michael, which is now a Category 3 major hurricane, the second of the season. Winds of 120 miles an hour, pressure of 957 millibars, moving towards the north, towards the Florida Panhandle, which will likely be making landfall in that region tomorrow afternoon. We'll talk ad nauseum about Michael. We also have Tropical Storm Leslie, which is nearly a hurricane now, moving south-southeast at about 12 miles an hour, and will eventually be moving back off to the east, winds of 70 miles an hour with that one. Newly formed Tropical Storm Nadine, with winds of 40 miles an hour and pressure 1,005 millibars. This will remain weak and not be a threat to any land areas. So here's a wide shot of the Atlantic right now. Obviously Michael here in the eastern Gulf, Leslie up here to the southwest of the Azores, sun's going down over here, so harder to view, and then Nadine out here towards the southwest of the Cabo Verde Islands. Let's start off with the biggest story today, which is obviously Hurricane Michael, which is now, again, a Category 3 hurricane, winds of 120 miles an hour, and a pressure of about 957 millibars, as Recon went in earlier today and found a pressure in the center. Looks like they're going in for a new pass. They found a pressure in the center of about 958 millibars with the drops on, but not exactly in the center, and they found wind speeds at the flight level of about 110 knots, which equates to not quite 105 miles an hour, 105 knots at the surface, excuse me, but considering this is in the southeastern quadrant, the northeastern quadrant is usually the strongest of the storms. This is just currently an estimation. The plane will go through the northeastern quadrant very soon, probably by the time this video is posted, and you can see what happened there. I don't know why that went away. Anyway, so here's the current satellite presentation. We can see on the infrared, you can see Michael, it was looking very well defined. It did have a better defined eye earlier today, but convection's been really trying to blow up in the northern quadrants, and it's been kind of obscuring the eye. That doesn't mean that the storm is weakening. In fact, the storm is continuing to strengthen right now. If anything, the convection that's going on right now is more of a sign of strengthening than weakening, because you have such strong thunderstorm activity developing in the northern quadrant, meaning that the storm is very vigorous and is trying to intensify a little bit. And the storm was about a Category 1 yesterday, bumped up to a 2 this morning, and is now a 3 like expected, and could even get stronger. It could even get to Category 4 intensity, although that is not currently forecast. It is currently forecast to peak as 125 on our Category 3. It could easily get to a 4 before it makes landfall. Here's a water vapor shot here showing basically the whole steering with Michael is kind of becoming more and more relevant over time. You see the trough out here over the Rockies moving in to basically over towards the Texas Panhandle with strong thunderstorm activity developing over the Lone Star State. And this trough that we've been talking about that's been shearing Michael a little bit has kicked up into the Ohio River Valley, and this is kind of a non-player at this point. And the ridge over here over basically towards the east of mid-Atlantic states is all of these factors here are currently aiding in a northerly flow over the Gulf, which Michael is taking advantage of and is being steered right into the Florida Panhandle, which will likely arrive there within the next 24 hours. We can see that here in the National Hurricane Center forecast cone. You can see hurricane warnings up from basically the Florida-Alabama border down towards Cedar Key, this general area, and then watches and warnings, tropical storm watches and warnings basically surrounding that in gradients around these around this warning here. You can see this is the core of Michael, the wind field here in orange, and this is the tropical storm force winds, and then here more of the brownish shade that is hurricane force winds of 74 miles an hour or greater, and this is going to be progressing with this cone here and will be making landfall probably around Panama City, Mexico Beach by the time you get to about 1 p.m. basically between 1 and 4 p.m. tomorrow. Sometime in the afternoon is when we're expecting the eye to move ashore in Florida. And again, basically, the cone is centered near Panama City, Mexico Beach. However, it could still deviate as far east as Apalachicola, potentially even a bit further east, or it could deviate as far west as, say, Destin. That's also a possibility. And wherever the storm does make landfall, there's going to be all the threats that are associated with hurricanes. Obviously, you got the wind, which is high right now, 120 miles an hour, and that's nothing to sneeze at. However, we always need to remember that wind is not the main killer in a tropical cyclone. That comes from the water, from both inland flooding from rainfall and saltwater flooding coming in from storm surge. Let's begin with rainfall here. Rainfall totals are expected to be 6 to 10 inches. That might not sound like a whole lot considering we had Florence here in the Carolinas almost a month ago that dropped about 36 inches of rain in isolated spots. It might not, 6 to 10 might not sound like a lot, but remember that it doesn't take a whole lot of rain to cause significant flooding. And even 6 to 10 inches of rainfall is significant. It can cause quite a lot of flooding, in fact. And also, you need to remember that this is not just high amounts of rainfall near the coastline. You can see it extends inland, basically with the track of Michael here. And you can see it, these 4, 6, 8-inch totals extending from into Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, where they don't need it right now because Florence just impacted this area about a month ago, and then even further up towards the northeast as the storm is expected to kick off and become extratropical by Thursday night, Friday here. In addition to rainfall, storm surge is a huge threat with tropical cyclones of any caliber. You can see here that we have potentially as high as 10-foot storm surge inundation possible in this bay here, Appalachia Bay, coming in from basically at the point of landfall and the east of there. This portion of coastline is likely to see the highest levels of storm surge, and again, 10 feet is a lot. That can flood the first level of your home easily. And some good news is that this portion of coastline is not very heavily populated. However, that does not mean that this is going to be taken any less lightly than it would be with anything else, because if this storm does end up deviating as far west as, say, Destin, Seaside, this general area right here, then we could have these totals translating over into Panama City down to Apalachicola, and that would mean that these 10-foot inundations would be moving into this area. And if this moves further east, then that just piles in even more water here. And storm surge is the #1 killer with tropical cyclones. If you have been told to evacuate because of it, do so now. You should have your preparations almost completed. If at the very least, you should have your preparations almost completed. Have them fully done by tonight. Get out as soon as you can, because the storm is coming in pretty quickly and will be here within the next 24 hours or less. And, roads are probably clogged in here, obviously, because people are trying to get out ahead of the storm. Try and find a safe route for you. If you need to just go over towards, say, Gainesville or Orlando, then that'll work, because this portion over here, not expected to see a whole lot of rain, if any, from Michael. This area should be left alone. So if you need to go over there, then that's fine. Just try not to go north and northeast into Georgia or the Carolinas, because they are going to be seeing impacts from Michael as well, potentially significant ones at that. And in addition to rainfall, storm surge, and wind, there's also a tornado threat here. The Storm Prediction Center has issued a slight risk of severe weather in the general area where Michael is expected to make landfall tomorrow. With any tropical cyclone making landfall, you're likely to have these tornadoes that quickly spin up. They're not these huge plains supercellular thunderstorms, but they can be pretty significant. They're usually relatively weak. EF0, EF1 are very common and not very long-lived, but if you do have one moving near your home, then it's more than enough to cause significant damage to your home. So be vigilant of the potential for some tornadic activity tomorrow associated with the landfall of Michael, as is the case with most, if not all, landfalling tropical cyclones. So basically anywhere in the eastern part of where Michael is making landfall, just be aware that is a possibility along with the threat of storm surge. We could see quite a few tornadoes dropping down in this area along with these other threats that I mentioned earlier. So again, it's not just Florida. You can see up here even into Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, we have tropical storm warnings and watches. And that's because once Michael moves up into this portion of the country here, you're still going to have onshore flow coming in that could potentially result in some storm surge inundation here as well. In fact, if I just go over here really quick, it doesn't have it up, but I would imagine storm surge values could be as high as 3 feet in some areas along this coast, from basically the Georgia-Florida border up here to, say, Duck in North Carolina. This is where you could see some pretty significant storm surge inundations, especially along the coast of Georgia and South Carolina, I would imagine. So, and then again, it's supposed to kick out and become extratropical by Thursday night and Friday, and should be no more pretty soon after that. Alright, so that's Michael. Quickly touching up on the other storms. Here's Leslie today. A lot better defined than it was yesterday. We have a primitive eye feature coming back with the storm. It is easily possible that the storm is going to become a hurricane once again tonight. In fact, that might already be happening right now. As you can see, the storm is moving towards the south-southeast at this point and will likely make a bend towards the east soon. As you can see here in the GFS model, you can see Michael off here towards Florida, but we're going to focus on Leslie here because Michael's track is pretty set in stone at this point. You see, Leslie does take that southeast dip, and then kind of stalls, but then starts to eject itself back towards the east once we get into Thursday and Friday. And then once we get into the weekend, it's going to be kind of interesting to see what the evolution of Leslie will be here, because this trough up here that you can see kind of dipping in over the northern Atlantic of the Azores, this is likely to miss Leslie at this point. So it's going to depend on whether or not this ridge that builds to the west of the storm, if it's strong enough to build in over the Azores. If it is, then the storm could curse south before it reaches potentially the Canaries, Portugal, or Morocco here, and then would have to turn back towards the west, and then eventually could even keep going for a very long time. That's just the GFS solution. The European solution has a similar track, however, it weakens the storm considerably because water temperatures in this portion of the basin are relatively low. This is a very unusual spot for tropical cyclones to form. This air also is very dry because you have the Saharan desert literally right here in Morocco, extending even over towards the Canaries, are very dry as well. And then, that's just going to hamper Leslie down and probably, according to this model, put it down towards remnant low status as the low just continues to move off towards the west with time. And the National Hurricane Center forecast shows it, again, regaining hurricane strength, but then starting to kick out towards the east-northeast by the time we get into Thursday, kind of just meandering out here for tomorrow. And then by Saturday and Sunday, it will weaken a little bit because, again, this portion of the basin isn't as favorable, per se, for tropical cyclones, and could even start taking a southward drift in accordance to what both the GFS and European models are saying at this time. Intensity remains uncertain. Track still remains very uncertain. Yesterday, both these models were showing it moving into the Iberian Peninsula. At this point, we just still pay attention to what Leslie is doing in the long term. This still could be a threat to Portugal, dare I say it, even Morocco possibly. But at this point, this seems to be the most likely track. Moving south of the Azores, potentially threatening Madeira Island as long with the rest of the Canary Islands. But we'll just have to wait and see on that. Still more of a long-range threat, so we'll continue just to monitor Leslie. Last, we also have newly formed tropical storm Nadine that formed earlier today. This was that previous disturbance I briefly touched on at the end of yesterday's video. It has become a tropical storm today. Not very well defined. You can kind of see here that the low-level center is exposed a little bit from the main convective canopy, and there is still some wind shear over it. You can see all these clouds over here basically screaming towards the northeast, and that's in accordance to a large upper scale trough that's kind of dipped in across the MDR towards the north. And then Nadine might try and punch through that, but then at the same time, you're still going to have a Leslie that's going to be up here in the northern Atlantic. If we can kind of go back a little bit here, we can see that here's Nadine on the run, and Leslie's all the way down here. So this storm's going to start feeling some of the outflow to some extent of Leslie here, and it's going to cause Nadine to weaken along with the general upper scale trough here that's going to be shearing it basically to shreds, and this thing will likely be no more by the time we get to the weekend. Here's the forecast. This is National Hurricane Center forecast showing Nadine becoming a depression basically by Friday, anticipating by Saturday. Forecast peak is about 50 miles an hour. I think that's fair. I don't see it getting any stronger than that. And also not a threat to any land areas, so not really a significant storm right now. Okay, so that's it for the tropics today. Of course, we have Michael moving in towards Florida. It's going to be a very big, possibly historic storm for this portion of the country, and will have to be very closely monitored over the next 24 hours as it approaches landfall. Almost Hurricane Leslie out here in the open Atlantic here will likely move into this portion of the basin, and then Nadine out here likely to do very little over the next couple of days. Okay, that's it for today. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to stay weather alert, especially during this time.